Just go with your heart.
Go, yeah, that's exactly right. Anyway, Neil, how's your week been?
It's been really good, thank you. Yeah, just
Anything
working.
exciting happening?
Uh Not major exciting things, just good to continue the work that we're doing.
Wow. It's nice, isn't it, really? Nice thing what you do.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, good
Yeah,
to get up and know that you're doing something great.
it is. And look, while we're on that topic, if you were standing in a queue ordering a lactose-free hot chocolate and an owner of an early learning service centre approached you, what would you say you did?
Yeah, look, I would say that I am part of being part of the prevention of harm and abuse of children and creating safer environments for children so that they can be empowered and supported, and the people in the organization can be trained and equipped to care for those children to the best of their ability.
And what what does that mean to them?
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, we Childsafe Australia is a not-for-profit harm prevention charity, and we work with organisations to prevent harm and abuse of children, but also to create the culture that children deserve. And so, I guess what it means to them is that they're part of what we do in terms of support. They're part of who we support, um, and I think the thing is for us is that up until just before COVID, weren't really in the space of early learning centres. And the reason for that is because we were kind of, doing training and educators and those sorts of things, but we just didn't really think about that space. And as I was sitting there, I was thinking about, what, if we want to create real change, we've got to start young and we've got to really empower them young. And so we engaged with Janine Sanders, who's an incredible person, and we developed body safety and consent training for educators. We ran a whole bunch of webinars to support parents. We supported educators in that space as well. And so what we now do is that we actually go all the way from that preschool all the way into end of primary school. And so we believe that if you are to educate those children at a young age, then therefore it equips them for life.
And of course, you're working with educators' well-being in that as well, I suppose, because we don't know where everyone's path has led them to or their experiences as well. And I'm thinking if I was that early learning provider talking to you, I'd be going, wow, so what do I do better? What can I do?
Yeah, well, I mean, personally for me, I'm really motivated to start younger because I'm a survivor of child sexual abuse. I was abused by another child, and I'm a firm believer. I'm a firm believer that what we teach the educators, who then teach the children, I believe that if I learnt those five body safety rules and what this is my body, what I say goes, then that may have deterred me from those experiences. It might not have, but I think that I would have been able to speak up and say, I'm sorry, that there, what you're doing and how you're speaking to me and what you're doing and you're going to touch me and those sort of things, I think I would have been able to stand up.
And confidently, maybe.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And be empowered. I mean, like, the child safety standards, stand number 2 talks about empowering children with a voice and understanding their rights. In Victoria, it's child safe standard number 3, but it's the same sort of thing. It's actually empowering children to actually have rights. Now, what's really important to note is that children aren't meant to protect themselves. Like, that's the adult's job to protect the child, right? But there's not always adults around, always, with children, even at a young age. And so it's important to give them the tools that they know and to teach them at home and those sort of places so that they can actually know exactly how to speak up when they need to, tell an adult if they feel unsafe, and understand their emotions and what feels like. And if they do feel unsafe, what that feels like in their body and those sort of things, which is exactly what we teach with the body safety and consent stuff.
Wow. So, look, when we were prepping for this discussion, we spoke about the importance of child family educator relationships for child safety. Can you tell us more about that?
Absolutely. Yeah. So we believe in a holistic community approach, which means that we train the educators of the school or the preschool, and then we train the parents, and then it's the educators who equip the children, but then that the parents continue that conversation. And so what we're focused on is that the body safety consent rules and the training and those things, it's not actually a start stop moment. It's actually an ongoing conversation. So, for instance, one of the things we say in our body safety consent training is that let's say Jimmy and Ellen are fighting and they're getting all riled up and they're getting angry and those sorts of things. They go over to, let's say, the body safety consent poster the one of the resources that we provide, and say, so can you tell me how are you actually feeling, and point to that emotion. So it's actually about that conversation. Or let's be honest, snot is another food group in childcare centres. Let's say that that's going on and they're wiping this and they're putting on that, whatever it is. We can go, hang on a sec. Remember what we talked about in My Body, What I Say Goes, that book, that it's actually everyone has a bubble and everyone has a body bubble, and only you can only go inside that body bubble if that person gives you permission to do so. So you wiping your snot like that and putting on there, that's actually disrespecting them, and they haven't given you permission to do that. So it's really important to understand that. So it's actually about an ongoing conversation rather than a set and forget approach.
In fact, I had a conversation recently with talking on this subject, and it was right about actually whether as adults we are so entrenched into giving a hug that because as a child you were told to do that, right?
Yep.
And the conversation was around, well, now as adults we actually should get that consent or even have a handshake rather than a hug, or only do that hug if both are consensual. Is that sort of the thing you're talking about?
Absolutely, yeah, because it puts the power back in the child's hands, if you like, for them to actually speak up to say, actually, this doesn't feel right. Like, I mean, one of the biggest things we found is that in COVID or after COVID, we had conversations with parents who would say, oh, the grandparents are coming over, and how do we go about that? Because our kids might not want to hug them. What do we do? And we say, well, that's actually okay, but you need to talk to your kids to say, this if you don't want to hug your grandparents, that's actually okay. And if they're going in for a hug and you say no, I don't want to today, and that's actually okay. Or I don't feel like a hug today, or whatever it is. Or if a parent is noticing that the child is squeamish, being squeamish and getting away from the parent or whatever, or the grandparent, then they need to take note of that and say, actually, no, today she's not having a hug, okay? And then if they get upset, which we find sometimes, it's about educating them to say, hey, no, what we're doing is we're empowering the children to have a voice in any physical touch, so which actually protects them from being groomed and hurt by people that they don't trust and those people that are trying to gain their trust. So it's about more of an educational piece there.
Yeah, and as you know, and as we've spoken about in the past, is it's usually a person close to that child, and what's the likelihood of them sharing that at some point with their educator in the service?
Absolutely. I mean, look, the training that we do with the educators is to help them understand that children have a life outside of that centre. Like they bring that life. I just listened to the new Australian childhood maltreatment study, and it's horrific, the abuse that is going on. But those children bring that emotional abuse, that sexual abuse, that physical abuse, that domestic violence, all of those things, there's emotion, everything. They bring them to that childcare centre. And what we do is we help educators to understand the types of abuse what are the indicators and those things. And also the most important thing is if a child does feel comfortable to disclose and share that information, that we teach the educator of how to actually listen and how important it is to actually take the time and to tell them how courageous they are in coming to you and those sorts of things. Because I think what we find is that children will talk when they trust someone, and unfortunately, often children are very innocent. And if an adult gives them that attention, or even another child, maybe a little bit older, gives them that attention, gives them that trust, gives them that warmth, that feeling inside them of, I kind of like this person, I think they're pretty cool. Then what happens is that they can do things that maybe they didn't really want to. My story is that I was bullied as a child by kids, and the person that befriended me was a boy that was only a little bit older than me, but he effectively groomed me, connected with me, and I actually went to a trusted adult, and I just said, like, is this what friendship is? I'd never had a friend before. I was 10 years old, and they said, no, you're just experimenting. And what I didn't realize is that actually went on for another 3 years of abuse. And I guess the thing for me is that connection with that person was what I was longing for. I didn't have a connection like that with my parents. And so therefore, to have the connection with this boy, even though we were doing stuff, like I actually, now going through this story and realizing it, I feel so guilty about what I did, because I got to a point where I wanted it, and so because I thought that's what friendship was. And I think when a child trusts an adult or trusts another child, they sometimes do things that they wouldn't want to do. And body safety and consent is about empowering those children to understand what is right and what isn't right, and what feels safe and what isn't safe. And so if a child does share what they're going through with an adult or with their educator, they need the tools to be able to support that child.
So when that person, the adult you trusted, said experimenting, what advice would you give them now?
Yeah, I would say, I can't swear on this, but I would say you're wrong. You're wrong. What that person was doing was they were going into my body bubble. They groomed me for their own pleasure, to work out their own sexuality, is which I believe. And it wasn't about me at all. It was all about them. And so I would say to them, there were so many signs. There were so many signs. I've come to you. I've shown you. I've told you. You need to listen to me, and you need to pull me out. I'm a child, right? So pull me out of that relationship as much as you can. It's a bit harder if it's a parent or whatever, but pull me out pull me out of that relationship, or stop seeing that person. I'm not allowing you to see that person anymore. Even change school, whatever it needs to happen in order to stop
Yeah,
that connection anymore.
absolutely. And in fact, our audience listening, whether you're an educator, a manager, a parent listening to this, any of us, you and I, could be approached by a child.
Absolutely.
So what would you say to us, just, in the audience?
Yeah. Well, I'd say that the first thing you need to do is say thank you to the child. Thank you for entrusting me with this information. I want you to know I take it seriously. The second thing is that you tell them how brave they are. Tell them that you're going to help them and to support them as much as you can. Tell them that they've done nothing wrong, and that they're going to be okay, and we're going to get you help. And I think those few words completely reject what the abuser is going to say to them. Because what the abuser says, or the perpetrator says, no one will believe you. If you say something, you're going to lose that friendship or that relationship. I'm going to kill you. you're not never going to, be friends with anyone again. Those sort of threatening statements. You know what I mean? And I think if you come with compassion and empathy, you're actually rejecting what they are actually, what the perpetrator had said to them, and you're actually affirming that they're still a person and they're valuable, and you're going to get them help, and then actually act. So report to the police, report to who you need to, obviously following your reporting procedures within your childcare centre. I'm sure you've got them, so that's really important as well.
And what is the prevalence of abuse in society?
Oh, it's really big. The child maltreatment study showed that even the ages between 16 and 24, that just a young was like 1 in 4. And it's horrible. And the thing is, a lot of abuse happens between the ages of 3 to 8. That's kind of like the number one place abuse really happens.
That's so young.
And right there is the reason why body safety and consent is so critically important. Abuse is so prevalent in society. It really is. And there is it's a pandemic in itself, and it needs the whole community to jump on board to say, actually, enough is enough. We're going to do everything we can to protect children. And I think here's the kicker in all this. What I've discovered is that often with childcare centres and other organisations, we focus so much on compliance. Like, we've got to comply with child safety standards. We've got to do all this sort of things. But we're actually forgetting the why compliance is so critically important. Why compliance is so critically important, and what's before that. And what's before that is understanding the impact of trauma. Impact of trauma is that if a child is abused in the organisation or anywhere, the impact could be huge. I mean, the impact is so big that it can actually rewire your brain, like actually rewire your brain. So when you experience trauma, it can affect the part of your brain that thinks whether it's past or present. It can affect the part of your brain that talks about the emotion and the fear centers. And also it can affect that part of the brain where that fight or flight or fawn response. And so often that switch with people who have been impacted by trauma, that switch of adrenaline is on, and that switch of fight or flight is on. And so they don't know, or when it comes to really fearful situations, then it's really hard to determine, because you're always like that. So if you start with the place of impact of trauma, and that's only a little bit of the impact, but just the impact of trauma, that's that starting place. And therefore, when you don't want to see that happen to any child, you will do everything you can. And the standards and the compliance side of things just gives you a bit of structure so you can do everything you can.
So would statistics show that effectively there would be a child in pretty much most services that are suffering from some form of abuse?
Absolutely, yeah. Well, I mean, like if you've got a class of 20, then you could have up to 8 kids. Like you might have 5 to 8 kids that could be actually experiencing some form of child maltreatment. That could be sexual abuse, that could be physical, emotional, family violence, neglect. There's a number of different abuse. And like I said, they bring their life to your workplace, and your job is to keep them safe in that workplace. And sometimes that means to listen to what they're going through.
So if I'm the educator, because I know we've got educators who will be thinking, what do we do? Like, I can see that they've probably got people listening now that are thinking, I can see some behaviours. Do they approach the parent?
Well, that's a really interesting question. And I would say no, don't approach the parent. Your organisation should have procedures in place so that if there is a disclosure, or if you notice something that is just untoward, or there's an indicator of abuse that is happening, then it's really important for you to report that. And you do that through your reporting procedures, through your organisation. It's imperative you don't approach the parent and say, I noticed there's bruises on their arm or what, like, you just don't want to put a position where they think they're hiding the abuse that they're doing to the child, and then they may literally just skip town, might skip out of it, whatever it is. But if you do your proper reporting procedures, then it can be followed up. The hardest thing that you can't do is you can't take matters into your own hands, because let me guess, you're in this position in terms of as an educator because you care about kids, right? And sometimes that care factor becomes so overwhelming. A child just tells you that their parent's been abusing them or whatever it is. You want to lock them in a room, don't you? You want to put away and just say, "We're going to call the police." You're never having to go home again. You have no authority to do that. You have no authority to do that. And so therefore, you can do everything you can. You can call the police and say, "Hey, the parent is coming now. Can you get here?" But the truth is you can't have them, because the truth is we would probably have our house filled with kids because we want to protect them. And
Absolutely.
Your job is to love them and support them and to empathize with them and listen to them.
Absolutely. So now, on that topic of parents, because that it's possible that there is parent abuse or grandparent abuse.
Yeah.
Is there a fear from parents when this topic is discussed at centre level? It might be just some information that goes out or whatever it is. What do you find? The response from parents when abuse is talked about?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things. One thing that some people won't actually engage, and what I mean by that is that they feel like, oh, well, if we're going to tell educators, something somehow in their mind, body safety and consent is about teaching children about sexual abuse. It's not. We don't even mention sexual abuse. It's actually about giving them the tools to protect them, to make them feel safe, right? So it's got nothing to do with talking to them about the indicators. That's not them. It's the educators that we talk to. And so what's really important is that as an educated, as a organization, you have to decide what are you actually going to teach the kids. And what we found is that parents sometimes, once you sort of go out with the information, parents might say, "Oh, like I don't want my children knowing this or understanding this or whatever it is. I think it's going to put things in their mind or whatever." And so we've got answers to those questions, but at the end of the day, you as an organization have to draw a line in the sand and say, "No, this is something so important." And if that is the case for you, then maybe this childcare centre might not actually be for you, and that's okay. The reason being is because this is so serious; it's so important, and so some of the fears that parents have, or just the thought of their child experiencing abuse is enough for them to go, "Whoa, hang on a sec, I need to actually know this more." So it could actually work in your favor, but also it can actually bring up things for their own journey as well. Because someone said, I heard this the other day, they said, like, it's not just about supporting the child who could be abused, it's actually also about supporting the parent who probably has been abused. And the truth is that with the statistics so high across the nation, there's a lot of parents out there who have experienced abuse.
And of course, that would then build that fear as well, because there's a story behind that as well. What
Yeah.
would you recommend to help a service have success engaging parents and families?
Make sure that you do the body safety and consent parent session, because that helps to educate them. It's pretty much the same as the educator session, except that it doesn't go into depth into the things that we do with the educator. In that it's not so much about the lessons that are being taught as it is the conversation that needs to be had. And so to get success means that it needs to be that whole of community approach. So we train the educators and the parents, you educate the children, and we keep the conversation going. So weekly or monthly or whatever it is, there's something in the newsletter around body safety consent. Remember the conversation, and so that it's not just we've done the 10 lesson plan. Oh, now we're done. Do you know what I mean? It's actually part of our culture is body safety and consent. And that's so important, is that it becomes an ongoing conversation. And that's how you get success, because then it's not so much about, oh, tick the box, done. It's actually about, we're going to do this holistically together. Yeah.
And with that, I know we spoke earlier how important language is in explaining body parts and things like that.
Yeah.
Is that? Do you want to give us a little bit more information about that on just using correct language?
Sure. Let me give you a bit of a story. So a kinder. I'm not sure if you've got people from kinder's going to be on here, but a kinder teacher was sitting down with a child, and the child was saying, "I don't want to go home today." And she was saying, well, "Why don't you want to go home?" He said, "Because my dad keeps parking the car in the garage." And she's sitting there going, "I don't." Well, that's where the car normally goes, right, in the garage. And then she goes, "No, parking the car in the garage," and pointed to her vagina. And what she was really saying was, "Dad, I don't want to go home because Dad has been raping me." And the reality is that choosing to call your body parts by not the right names actually doesn't hold up in a court of law. And so, that it could be dismissed for lack of evidence, and that happens often. And so it's really important for body parts to be called penis, vagina, vulva, breast, bottom, mouth, and so that a child is able to share that and say, like, "Don't touch my penis," or "Don't touch this," or "My grandpa touched my penis," or that sort of thing. And so to make sure that that's actually taught, and then therefore teaching the parents as well, because like in my day, pet names all the time, like he's Willie, or he's this, or whatever it is, or and the reality is adults do it all the time, and it's really interesting because since I've taught my daughter and my kids about it, sometimes I slip up and they're like, "Oh, Dad, it's not balls, it's testicles." You know what I mean? Or if it's and so I think it's ingrained in a lot of people to call it a pet name because they think it's cute. The problem is perpetrators know that too, and so if they call it a pussy, and then therefore that's what they could say, right? But when the child goes to the educator and says, like, this person, my grandpa or whatever it is, or my dad or whatever it is, keeps, patting the pussy or whatever it is, they might go, "Oh, well, that's pretty normal, like patting the cat," and then, so what I'm saying is it's just so important. Correct body names can prevent abuse.
It's so important. It's so important. And thank you for sharing, like, not only the story about that little girl, but also your story. And being able to do this is amazing, where you're helping others. And I know you mentioned, was it Janine earlier?
Yeah, Janine Sanders. Yeah.
Yeah. So we'll have all the information, all the links for what you're talking about, so that educators and our audience could probably reach out to you as well.
Of course. Yeah.
Especially if they're not sure what those procedures are in their centre.
Yeah, absolutely. We can help with that. Absolutely. Yeah.
Do you find if in a centre with an educator, do you find most of them know what the process is? Would it be something that you would tell that early learning service provider that we talked about earlier to make sure that's something that's missed often?
Absolutely. I honestly think, there are a lot of requirements, like extra requirements for early learning centres. But what we have found is that a lot of what we teach is like new information, or maybe it's just a bit more gentle than they've experienced, or maybe it's a little bit more informative or something. But I've found that it's been a bit profound for a lot of people. Like, for instance, the mouth is actually a private part, and a lot of people go, "Oh, wow, how's it a private part?" Well, let me tell you something, right? If someone if let's say it's not a private part and a perpetrator puts his penis in their mouth or whatever it is and says to the child, well, I didn't touch you. I didn't touch you with my hands or anything like that. I didn't do anything like that. And it's not a private part. And so therefore, like, we're not doing anything wrong, right? Or vice versa. And so, but the truth is a lot of abuse has happened by the mouth. And so now it's being shown that the mouth is actually a private part and no one should touch you, and therefore no one should kiss you. No one should do anything like that without your permission, without you giving a yes. And so understanding that is so important. But this is what I'm saying is a lot of educators have heard bits and pieces around child safety training, but not understood the body safety consent side of things. And I think we bring an empathy approach and a no crap approach kind of thing. Like, we don't holds barred. We really are honest with our stories and those sorts of things.
Yeah, which is really what, if I'm an educator listening today, and I'm like, wow, this is big. What do I do? How do I learn this? Or just that language about how they change what they're doing. It's a big step.
Absolutely. And I think, thinking back in terms of meeting someone and saying, oh, they're an early learning centre, I would say go beyond what you're being told. Like, go beyond what government and regulation and all that sort of stuff. Ask yourself the question, do I want to see a child abused? Of course, the answer is most probably no. So therefore, what would you do? How would you go about it to stop that? And so that's really important.
Yeah. And look, what's some practical advice that you can give our audience about being aware of something, or, that language in with the child, or with a perception of, that someone may be abused? Is there anything, you'd like to share with us about, that the steps, or just that real handy bit of information? There's something key that you would like to share?
As in with the child? Is that
with the child? Yes. If I'm the educator and I'm trying to get around what I need to do, or I've got this child, what's some really key points that you would tell them that they need to do?
Look, I think the first thing is to be a trusted adult. One of the things body safety and consent we talk about is 5 adults that you can trust. One of that part is it really should be you as a teacher. Like, be a trusted adult. And how do you do that? You actually show them how to enact the body safety and consent. So you would actually say to them, can I put my hand on your shoulder? Instead of this kind of like, oh, I'm just going to do that, or can I, we're going to cross the road now. Which hand would you like to hold? So it's actually giving them their power in order to move them from, you're the child, sit in the corner and listen to what I say, and I'm the adult, you do exactly what I say, to actually, no, we're on equal plane here. I've just got a bit more education so I can help and support you. And so if a child does trust you with that information, the kind of steps is to be able to actually just listen and show that you're listening, be there for them, and to help them navigate the path. Because, trauma is difficult, and it's hard. And if a child is experiencing something, they've shown so much courage to say something. And if they're going through all this emotional breakdown and things like that, and I will say this, what you see is not always what's going on. So if there is an emotional breakdown of a child, maybe it's not so much an emotional breakdown as it is them trying to get out what's actually been going on for them, maybe at home, that they've been hiding. And so actually parents who are listening as well is to think, hang on a sec, if it's an emotional breakdown, or if it's screaming, or it's or they're just sitting there, just almost frozen, maybe ask the question about who they are and where they're at, and also then ask the question, if you need to, has anyone touched you or made you feel unsafe lately?
Wow. Wow, Neil, it's there's so much we could talk about, isn't there? It's like
Absolutely. Yeah.
there's so much to this, and I think we'll have another podcast anyway later
Yeah,
down the track
sure.
to talk about it next. Now, before I finish up, what I really love to ask our guests is, what are the biggest challenges for the sector in the next 2-5 years? And we love to get your thoughts on this.
Look, I think one of the largest challenges for the sector is the amount of people going to be coming through your doors that have been abused, that are neglected, are struggling, have developed mental health disorders or are on that direction, or parents that are as well. And so you're not just navigating the child, you're actually navigating what's been going on in their life as well. And so it's really important for you to educate yourself as much as you can so that you can support that child and the parents as they come. The other thing is that the compliance side of things and the legal requirements and those sorts of things have been rolled out, but I think it's actually understanding that trauma, as I was saying before, is that
Yeah.
it's actually flipping the lid and going, actually, no, we need to think about that. So I think the challenge is going to be recognizing the importance of that trauma. And the other one as well is being directed by what people or parents are saying you should do rather than what you really should do. And I think, the body safety consent is that real important topic to be discussed as a conversation. And I think it outweighs, do we need a new coffee machine in the staff room kind of thing,
Yes, absolutely. Now, when we talk about this, next 2 to 5 years, have we progressed much in reducing abuse or for want of a better word, in that last 10 years? Do we have statistics to show that there is that we have reduced it, that we are making a difference?
Not so much statistics per se, but they have said, the ACMS study and also other studies have actually shown that abuse has reduced in organisations. Now, I'm not 100% certain of that, to be honest with you. The reason why I say that is because studies are only what people come forward to say. So you've got to think about all those people that can't. And let's be honest, it takes an average of 25 years for a child who's been abused and then becomes an adult in order to say something. So 25 years, they're holding on to this. So, I mean, I would say that there is way more education than ever before, right? I 100% believe that adult that I trusted, if they had the education they had that we have now, I don't think they would have said the same thing. And so I think, but that whole Spider-Man quote, with great power comes great responsibility, Well, with great education comes the responsibility to act on that education. And so I think that there's more education. Has abuse reduced? I think in some sectors, probably. But if you live in out-of-home care, it's still very, very high. Sporting, very high, different places like that. I think there's still an apathy to say, in my organisation, I don't reckon things are going to happen here. And let me tell you now, we have done a few audits with childcare centres, early learning centres, because abuse has happened there. And the reason why it's happened, they've had everything in place, but someone has slipped through the cracks. And so what I would say to your educators, trust your gut in your interview process, not just what's on paper. You've got to go with that gut feeling too. If you don't feel like something's right, please don't hire them.
Wow, that's powerful, actually.
It's so important.
So important, because I mean, I'm a parent, but also thinking if I have to trust my gut because I think there's something wrong, to actually push that forward is a big step.
It's a massive step. And I think, they say that the gut is the second brain, right? And so in your brain, you're looking and going, on paper, they've got checks, they've got reference checks, all that sort of stuff. but something doesn't sit right. You know, a question that I asked about the motivation, the way they said that, it just didn't feel right. And, you know, you got to check your own kind of thoughts as well, but also to understand the gut is a really important thing. You know how that thing as a parent, you're around a bunch of people at the playground or whatever it is,
Yeah.
and you're like, man, something just doesn't feel like this guy I've just been talking to just doesn't feel right to
Yep.
me, or the way he's looking at, or this woman, how the way she's speaking to her child or whatever, just doesn't feel right. Well, the truth is, these are the people that are actually in organizations caring for kids. And so what's really important is trusting that gut to go, hang on a sec, I'm sorry, it doesn't feel right to me. Yeah.
And so really you're saying then speak up, be comfortable to speak to your trusted person.
Yeah, absolutely. And speak to your supervisor and say, look, you know, or if you are the supervisor, you know, speak to someone and say, I've got this person, I can't tell you the name. This is the situation. They all check out and all that sort of stuff, but it doesn't feel right, you know. And you've got to have that group of people that you have in order to actually talk about these things too.
Yeah.
And to go, it's not about filling a position. You know, there's 500,000 jobs right now in Australia available, right? 500,000 across
Wow.
Australia, right? And so there should really be an unemployment crisis, really, should there? But the truth is that that there are people, perpetrators.
Hold that thought. I've got a cough.
Yep.
Gives Lloyd a chance to cut it out. I could not even get the water to stop that one. Okay. I'm all good.
You're right.
All good, yep.
Okay. Yeah, the truth is the perpetrators understand what's going on as well. And so they will try to infiltrate places that don't have things in place. And so even if you have a lot of things in place, but you know, maybe your interview process is a bit shonky, or it's just not right, or I'm going to hire people I trust or know or whatever, then maybe, you know, they could actually try to, I guess, infiltrate that kind of organization.
Yeah. Oh, wow. Now, before we do finish up, we love to ask our listeners, our guests, for a personal motto or a wise word. Do you have one you'd like to share?
Of course. I love it.
Fantastic.
Yeah, absolutely. So the one thing that sort of gets me through is a saying called, or my axiom is, a one day at a time. And the reason is, it's not that I don't plan for the future. It's just that if I plan for the future and don't focus on the moment, then I miss the moment. And in that moment could be very, very prevalent. And so that connects to not being too busy in order to help and support people, but just taking that one day at a time and not feeling like you have to leap further forward. And that goes to child safety as well, to go, okay, what's in front of me right now? And then how do I work towards that? That's in friendship, that's in relationship, that's in a whole bunch of different areas. And so that's got me through a lot.
Wow, that's actually very powerful, one day at a time.
Mm.
And look, and thank you so much for sharing everything today, especially that personal story of yours. And, you know, it's so good to see you've survived that, and also what you do is amazing. And what we'll have ready for our audience through our podcast is links to child safety and the body safe.
Yep. So body safety and consent. Yeah.
Yeah. And also anything else you'd love to share with our audience, that would be wonderful. But thank you so much for your time, Neil. It's been wonderful to speak with you. And one day at a time.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me.
Not a problem, Neil. Thank you.